Hey everybody, how are you doing? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Happy Tuesday. Hope you're still enjoying the aftermath of that North London derby victory. I know it sounds kind of Spursy to still be going on about it, given that we've got huge fish to fry. We go to Bergamo on Thursday night to take on the Europa League winners of last season, Atalanta, in the UEFA Champions League. Yes, a competition that Tottenham can only dream of playing in at the moment. And we go, of course, to the Etihad on Sunday, where we take on Manchester City in what I expect to be an even harder game than the one we just experienced at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But look, I'm going to enjoy it until we play again, basically, is where I'm at on this. And on today's show, we've got quite a bit to get into. We're going to focus on Bukayo Saka. Are there concerns over his fitness? He did go off with what looked like a cramp against Spurs. Will he be available for Atalanta? Will he be available, perhaps more importantly, for Manchester City? We're going to talk Bukayo Saka. We're going to discuss the England man. We're also going to let you guys know what's coming up on Patreon and how you can join our Patreon page, as well as telling you a little bit about Gabriel'S situation as well. There's no real urgency around his contract because he does have 3 years to go. But I think this is a situation where Arsenal need to be proactive rather than reactive, and we'll get into exactly what I mean on that. Share a couple of interesting stats with you guys as well. And as always, take some thoughts from the live chat box as well. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Hello, people. Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop out the chat on my right-hand screen so that I can bring it over to my screen that's right in front of me so that I can look at it nice and easily. Because I feel like since I've switched to the software that I currently use, which is something different, I've maybe been slacking a little bit in terms of how much I interact with the chat. That's something I'm really, really conscious of. So I want to make sure that isn't a thing. So let's try and find ways to fix that. Let me say a few hellos to you because there are plenty of you with me this afternoon. I was going to say this morning, but the day's run away from me. A big hello to Stefan, who's in the chat. Ray says, good morning, Harry and others. I still feel great about that win on Sunday, as you should, my friend. Stefan goes on to say that he thinks that he doesn't mind, actually, that if Bukayo Saka, I beg your pardon, misses a few games, he needs to rest anyway, and that will give the opportunity for Jesus or for Sterling. Gabby's future is and should be the same at Arsenal as Saliba's, talking about Big Gabby at the back, of course. And he says, we can't let them go to Real Madrid or any other big club, even if Calafiori is in. We'll talk about that dynamic a little bit later on in the show because I think that's really, really important. Big hello to Tom, to Guna, to Glenn, to Damien, to Ray, to Wesbird, to Moore, to Django, to John Daly as well. Plenty of other names in the chat. If I go through them all, I'll never do anything else. But a big hello to Angela, Afsar, Steve, Junior Gunner, DJ Ash, all the rest of you in the live chat. I hope you're all great, and thank you as always for joining me. Really, really do appreciate it. Some of you saying that you do get notifications when we go live. Some of you saying that you don't. I can't control that, unfortunately. It is a YouTube thing, which is why I try and schedule the streams normally about 30 to 45 minutes before. I'm hoping that you'll get a notification for that. If you don't, that you'll get one when we go live. But yeah, that's all I can do, unfortunately. It's not something that I have control of, which is quite frustrating, I gotta say. But anyway, let's get into today's stories, and let's start off with Bukayo Saka. Now, according to everybody who's anybody in the Arsenal space, the outlook on the Bukayo Saka situation is quite positive. Now, as I mentioned, he went off in the North London derby with what looked like a cramp. It's been reported since that it was indeed cramp. It's something that he's been suffering with a little bit, and it just kind of reared its ugly head again. I'm not surprised on Sunday that was the case, because if you go back to yesterday's episode where we spoke about the system that Mikel Arteta used to, in my words, end Ange Ball, and basically show everybody in the footballing world. Not that everybody was kind of completely oblivious to it. I think a lot of teams had figured it out in the second half of last season. But what Mikel Arteta put on Sunday was a masterclass in how to stop Tottenham hurting you. And I suspect, as I said on yesterday's episode, which you can go back and check out, that there will be a lot of clubs following that blueprint when coming up against Tottenham in the coming weeks. And if Tottenham continue to be as wasteful and lack that cutting edge in attack, then they could pick up some really poor results in the coming weeks, which would only ramp up the pressure on Mr. I always win things in my second season. So, yeah, I think it was an Arteta masterclass. But as part of that system, as part of that setup, we were demanding a hell of a lot from our wide players, one of which, of course, was Bukayo Saka. And so when you think about the work rate that he put in, the distance covered, the amount of times that he had to bust the gut to get up the pitch and be a part of an attack, and then very, very quickly bust the gut to get back and support Ben White and help us double up in that area. But also at times he was coming infield and filling holes and spaces that maybe Thomas Partey was leaving when he was on the occasion sucked out of his position to go into different areas. So I'm not surprised in the slightest that Bukayo Saka was so tired that he ended up getting a cramp. But yeah, the outlook is good. It looks like he will be fine for both Atalanta and Manchester City. And then I guess that brings up the debate of whether or not you think he should play against Atalanta, because there would be a temptation if I were Mikel Arteta to leave him out of the side. Now, let me be clear on this, and we're going to talk about Atalanta in more detail on tomorrow's episode when we comprehensively preview that game. But I don't think they're a side that you can take lightly. They're last season's Europa League winners. They've got a lot of good players. They've got a system under Gasperini that really, really works. Everybody knows their job inside out. And they are not an opponent that you can turn up against, half-arse it, and leave with a result. So there's a case that actually Arsenal should play their best team. And I think if this was in any other week, that's exactly what I would be doing. There wouldn't even be a debate for me on this. But I think we're in a really unique situation here in that this is a really unique week. To go to Spurs on a Sunday and then to go to Bergamo on the following Thursday and then have to go to Manchester City the Sunday after, that is one hell of a big week. And particularly when we're talking about Arsenal going through a kind of mini injury crisis at the minute. Yes, Declan Rice returns for the game at Atalanta, which is good and positive. And, you know, maybe some are hoping that Martin Odegaard could be in the picture, given Arteta's comments ahead of Spurs. Again, I don't think he will be. I think if anything, if he is able, they'll be pushing him for Manchester City. But whether that is even possible, I still think remains to be seen. And it's probably still unlikely, if I'm being completely honest. But there would be a temptation maybe to make a few changes. You bring Declan Rice back in, you can leave out one of the midfielders. Do you bring Gabriel'S into the starting 11? Do you bring Raheem Sterling into the starting 11? Because ultimately, one of the big kind of benefits of bringing Raheem Sterling in is that we can probably give Bukayo Saka a rest more than we could have done previously, because in my opinion, he's an upgrade on Reece Nelson or anybody else that you would say could play on that right-hand side effectively. And when I say that, right, I'm not putting Martinelli and Trossard on that right-hand side. They're our left side. The way I look at this team and the way I look at the forward group that we have is very, very simple. We've got two centre forwards in Havertz and Jesus. And then we've got four wingers. Two for the left, in my opinion, in Trossard and Martinelli. Two for the right in Saka and Sterling. Now, Sterling can play on the other side as well, which is a bonus and is an added benefit. But I think the reason we brought him in was because we needed an upgrade on the replacement option for Bukayo Saka, as well as the fact that he's a bloody good player, quite versatile across the front line, very experienced, someone that Mikel Arteta knew inside out, and someone that we think can add value in a number of ways. But if you can't give Bukayo Saka a breather here, given that we have 8 of these Champions League games to make sure that we get the job done, and given that we now have Raheem Sterling available to us, then when the hell can you? Because I just, I look at this week and I think it's massive, and you've got to, you've got to try and play your best team at every opportunity. And I'm not for a second suggesting that the Champions League isn't as important as the Premier League. I've gone on record many times saying to you guys that I would prefer that Arsenal win the Champions League over the Premier League, because for me, it's the one I've never seen. It's the one I've never had. I was, 16 years old when we lost that Champions League final to Barcelona in Paris, and I've never gotten over that. I've never been able to sit down and watch the highlights of that game. Of course, I've seen them crop up from time to time. I've seen the goals bouncing around on social media and all the rest of it, but it's never something I've been able to bring myself to watch. That is a trauma in my life, that Champions League final, and I need us to put that right. So, yeah, where am I on this Atalanta team selection? Well, we're going to do this in more detail on the preview show, of course, but my kind of early and initial thoughts are, what was the point in adding Raheem Sterling if you can't give Bukayo Saka a breather when he clearly needs one? And let's remember that Bukayo Saka barely had a summer. The same can be said of Declan Rice. And particularly if we're planning to go to Manchester City and set up in a similar way to what we saw against Spurs, which was in this kind of 4-4-2 formation off the ball and with a real big demand on our wide players to get up and down the pitch, etc., then that kind of makes the case to rest him even stronger. Because if you're going to demand that kind of work rate out of him at the Etihad on Sunday, then I would question whether it's possible you're going to get that if he goes to Atalanta, has to play 90 minutes in a grueling game. I think there will be other changes. I'm hoping that Calafiori's available because I'd love to see him come in. I think Declan Rice can come in because obviously he's had the weekend off, which wasn't ideal for us, but it is what it is, and let's seek to extract the benefits from that situation, I guess. There's a case that says Gabriel'S comes in. He's been very effective for us in the Champions League, and again, I go back to the point about sort of the increased workload on some of our key players because of the ones that we have missing. And I would argue that maybe Kai Havertz, who is going to be extremely busy at the Etihad, deserves a rest here, and so maybe bring Jesus in for him. I don't know. We're going to do this in more detail, as I say, on the preview show, and I'll come up with an 11 that I would like to see. But I do think that I'm at a point now where my thinking has changed. I now feel more comfortable with the idea of Bukayo Saka being rested and the level not massively dropping, because I believe in Raheem Sterling a lot more than I believe in, with all due respect, Reece Nelson, who was that guy previously. So yeah, looks like Saka is going to be available. Looks like he's going to be fit, which is good. But whether I'd play him or not, I'm not so sure. We're going to come on to talk a big Gabby in a minute, because I think that's a really, really good discussion that I want to have today. And I'm desperate to get you guys' thoughts on this particular conversation as well. And as I mentioned right at the top of the program, it's not that I think we're desperate to sign him up on a new contract because of the length remaining. But I do think there's another reason whereby I think Arsenal should be being proactive here. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail right after this short pause. I'm going to take a pause just to tell you about our partners, about our good friends over at NordVPN. It's the best damn VPN service out there, and I can tell you that from experience because I use it myself on pretty much a daily basis. It allows me to change my geolocation with the click of a button, which is huge because it opens the door for me to different bits of content, different streams, etc., etc. I can access things that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to access in the UK. Plus, I get extra protection online because of the way the VPN service works. It adds another layer, which makes it far more difficult for anybody to get a hold of your details, to monitor what you're doing, etc., etc. And as someone whose business is largely based, if not completely based online, that's really, really important to me, to know that I can go and do my online banking, to know that I can go and fill in forms with my personal details and sensitive details, knowing that I have that added layer of protection. It really does give me peace of mind. And if you're a listener of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, there is an exclusive deal available to you. You get a mega discount plus 4 months for free at the end of your plan. That's available to you now by visiting nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC. That's nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC. The link is in the description below. Do check it out. We thank NordVPN for their support of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast throughout this month. Also, while I'm on the subject of plugging things, check out our Patreon page. You can get access to our Patreon content, which is available to those that are signed up. You can get the match day reaction pods that will be dropping on the night and day of every single match. It will be more of a kind of instant reaction thing with some extra bits and pieces sprinkled on top. Plus, we're going to do in focus episodes. We've done a few already. They're on there now. You can check them out, where we focus on particular players or topics or subjects, and we really kind of deep dive into those. Not only will you get access to that extra content, you become part of the community, but you also would be supporting me to continue to bring you daily episodes of this podcast. And as I've said many, many times before, it does make the world of difference when you're in the freelance world, as I am, when you're trying to run your own business, to be able to lean on the support of your loyal listenership is amazing. It's not something I take for granted, but it's something I really, really do appreciate and value. So thank you guys that are already signed up. Remember, patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. Again, the link is in the description below. Right, let's get on to Big Gabby then. Let's talk about him, because this is a really important topic right now, in my opinion. And I guess the reason I feel really strongly about this is because I feel like personally, this is a battle that I've been fighting in debates for a long, long time. And those of you that are regular listeners that have been with us for a while will know that this is something I've said time and time again. So I'm not just jumping on the bandwagon after he scores the winning goal in the North London derby. This isn't that. This is much deeper for me. As I mentioned at the top of the programme, Gabriel still has 3 years to run on his current Arsenal deal. So in theory, there's no real urgent need to give him a new contract because he's still got 3 years. You would argue that when he gets down to 2 years, that's probably the time that the conversations need to start happening. And that's probably the point at which everybody needs to come to the table and decide where we're going to go with this. But according to spotrac.com, which is a website that lists what they believe players' salaries are at various football clubs, and I had a look at this morning, and I looked at a couple of other sources too, and I settled on this one because I thought this was consistent with a lot of the other information that I was reading. There was one outlier in terms of sources, and so I kind of ignored that one. But I certainly felt that this was an accurate representation of what everybody at Arsenal's earning at this moment in time. And I looked at it, and I want to say I was stunned. I wasn't stunned because I knew it, but reading it and seeing it on paper, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. Now, Gabriel is on £100,000 a week. Now, that's not money to be sniffed at. I wish I was on £100,000 a week. So I'm not for a second suggesting that Gabriel is having to live through poverty and this is a really, really difficult time for him and all our thoughts should be with him. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is he is on £90,000 a week less than William Saliba. £90,000 a week less. So what you are essentially saying as a football club, and I know Saliba signed a new contract more recently, which is why he got that bump and why there is the disparity between the two players' salaries, right? But what I am saying is the message that gives is William Saliba, in our eyes, is double as important as you are. And I just don't think that's the case. And I haven't thought that's the case for a very, very long time. I think if I go back to when Gabriel first signed for Arsenal, did I think he was a little bit raw? Yes. Did I think he was rough around the edges? Absolutely. Did I think he had a blunder in him, a moment of madness in him? Yeah. Did I think he could lose his head at times? Yeah, for sure. All of those things were true at the time. And maybe that stuff is still in there somewhere. And I'm sure at some point, because we're all humans and we all make mistakes, we're going to see those things come through again at some point. But generally, his game has improved dramatically. Having William Saliba alongside him has helped, of course. To have a Rolls Royce of a centre-half next to you is huge in terms of your own game and your improvement in your developing, etc., etc. And I think the fact that they're two very different players in the way that they approach things is also beneficial to one another. So what I mean by that is I very much see William Saliba as the guy that cleans up, as the guy that brings the ball out more, as the guy who probably is a lot more composed in possession, who's probably someone who can thread the ball forward and put it into the right spaces a lot more comfortably. But Gabriel is the aggressor. And I always think in the best centre-back partnerships, if I think about some of the best centre-back partnerships over the years, there was always one that was a little bit calmer, there was a little bit more composed, there was a little bit more of a calming presence. And then there was one who was the aggressor, the one that would come and smash into the back of you, basically. The one that would never shirk any duel, that would always be there, that would bring that physical presence and power. But also in a team like this one, you have to be able to play a bit. And Gabriel can play. Like when I say that I think that in that particular department, maybe William Saliba's a bit ahead of him, that's not a slight on Gabriel. William Saliba, for me right now, is the best centre-half in world football. So Gabby has obviously benefited from having him next to him. But this idea that he's half as important as William Saliba is a nonsense. And I know that that's not what Arsenal are saying here. But when you look at the disparity between the two players' salaries, that's the impression that it gives. And again, timing is really, really important here because William Saliba signed a new deal with Arsenal far more recently and at a time where he had shown that actually we might have the best centre-half in the world on our hands. And over time, I believe that that's proven itself. So Arsenal were absolutely right to give William Saliba that contract, £190,000 a week. But the idea of one of them being on half of that basically makes me feel really uncomfortable because what is to stop Gabriel having his head turned? And I guess there's a bit of history here as well that also comes into my thinking. Remember at the start of last season when Gabriel was left out of the team and there was suggestions afterwards later down the line that it was because somebody had come in with a crazy offer and maybe his head wasn't right. I don't know if that's true, but those were the kind of reports that were going around at the time. Because that happened and because of the huge disparity between their two salaries, I'm sitting here thinking this makes me feel uncomfortable. And so I think Arsenal do need to be proactive here rather than reactive, rather than waiting until A, the contract runs down to a point where we desperately have to do something, or B, waiting for the player to knock on the door and say, guys, we need to sort this out. That's not the environment that you want to create because Gabriel's importance and the significance of those two as a pair in the heart of Arsenal's defence cannot be understated. They are crucial. They are key to everything that we hope to achieve in the coming seasons. So if I'm Arsenal Football Club, I'm opening those talks. And I don't know if they have. I don't know if they will. I don't know if they are. There's people out there in the Arsenal space that are far more qualified than me to tell you whether or not that is happening. But my opinion is that it has to happen. My opinion is that we need to be proactive rather than reactive. Arsenal need to sit down with Big Gabby and get this sorted. Because we gave, for example, Takahiro Tomiyasu a new contract recently. A player who was signed on one contract but obviously showed when he played his value and his importance. Unfortunately, in his case, he doesn't play enough, which is a problem for us. But Arsenal were proactive in saying, let's give him a deal that better reflects his role in the squad. And then it was sod's law that shortly after that, he ended up picking up another injury, which is going to see him out for we don't know how long. But if you're proactive in the Tomiyasu situation, God, there's no excuse for not being proactive in the Gabriel situation. I'm confident that because I believe Arsenal are being run in the right way nowadays and that there are competent people calling the shots, that this will happen if it's not happening already. But I just wanted to express my concern around it and highlight the disparity in the two pay packets because it should never be that big. Never. William Saliba's great and he's worth every penny of that £190,000. And if you don't keep rewarding people for their form, if you don't keep being proactive with these contract situations, you will get the likes of Real Madrid sniffing around. Real Madrid will sniff around anyway. But you've got to do everything within your power to strengthen your position in a situation like that. And Big Gabby is way too important. Not just because of what he does defensively, which is outstanding, which is immense, but because of what he does offensively too. Goals from set pieces, goals at big grounds, goals in big moments. That's what Gabriel brings to the table outside of all the excellent, fantastic, amazing things that he can do defensively. He's offensively one hell of a weapon. He really, really is. Let me take some of you guys' thoughts on this from the live chat. Really nice comment from Raphael who says, "Hi Harry, many thanks for the good work being a freelancer whilst providing excellent online content for Gooners. I enjoy your show and Patreon content. Best wishes." Thank you, mate, and thank you so much for your support. Remember, patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner is the place to find it. Can I just ask as well, before I continue through the comments, if you haven't done so already, guys, please leave a like on the video, because given how many of you are tuned into this live stream, the likes on the board right now, we're nowhere near where we need to be. It doesn't cost a thing. Please like the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. And if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review too, because that really, really helps. John says, just look at how Saliba was as soon as Gabby scored on Sunday. I believe Saliba really values having a player like Gabby next to him. Absolutely. The partnership is clearly something that carries over off the pitch and is a friendship as well. And that's what makes it really, really special, I think. BX Gunner says Gabriel is more of a captain than Saliba. G-Star said Gabby matured and has definitely got better. Some of you talking about the team selection for Atalanta and maybe who should be rested. We've kind of touched on that already, but we'll do it in more detail on tomorrow's episode. Afsar says Gabby is a bit like the Vidic of Man United and Saliba is like the Rio Ferdinand of Man United. That's a good comparison. One's a lot more combative, one's a lot more rough around the edges, but has equal importance to the one who is a little bit more of a Rolls Royce and a little bit more aesthetically pleasing in terms of his playing style, not anything else before you guys start. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good comparison. What else have we got in the live chat? Ray says Arsenal have been doing the same thing recently, going back to what I was saying about being proactive. He says they have been proactive with contracts. They have, and that's great. And I'm just saying that it needs to continue in this instance too, because for me, Gabriel is incredibly valuable. Wesbird says, spot on, Harry. It's about fairness, but more importantly, his value. And in my humble but accurate opinion, he's just as valuable as Saliba. For sure. And I think we're in this position that they're both incredibly valuable and both as valuable as each other. I would argue that if I was having to pick one as the more valuable, because he's younger and because of those things that I've mentioned already on this show, Saliba's probably just ahead of him. But Saliba isn't as good without Gabriel, and Gabriel isn't as good without Saliba. So the reliance on one another is a positive in a lot of ways, because it ensures that their game generally is at a higher level, because they're keeping each other honest. They really, really are. Now, we've got some fantastic options at centre-back at Arsenal Football Club. You know, Ben White would be a fantastic option. Tomiyasu, when he's fit, is a fantastic option. Jurrien Timber's a fantastic option. Ricardo Calafiori is a fantastic option at centre-back. Player whom we went out and paid good money for in the summer. But nobody gets close to those two as a pairing. And that's why you've got people like Jurrien Timber having to make do at left-back. It's why Calafiori's probably going to play over the course of the season. Hopefully, barring any major injuries, the majority of his minutes as a fullback. Now, that's not ideal for him. But when that defence turns up week in, week out and puts in performances like we have, 3 clean sheets from 4 Premier League games so far. We've been to Villa and Spurs and kept clean sheets. Very unlucky, I thought, to concede against Brighton. Never looked like conceding against Wolves with the exception of one David Raya save. But when you think about how defensively sound and solid this unit is, you'd be an idiot as a centre-back to knock on the manager's door and say, I think I deserve to play. You can't even make the case. And that's a great position for a manager to be in, because you don't want those dissenting voices. You don't want people being unhappy. But I think there's a real respect within the camp for what those two individuals, Gabriel and Saliba I'm talking about, there's a real respect for what they bring to the team, so much so that even those who seek to take their place have to acknowledge that. And if they don't, they'll be seen as bad apples and players that don't have the team's best interests at heart. Just on their threat from corners as well, I saw this stat flying around this morning that I wanted to share with you guys. Since July 2021, Arsenal have broken the deadlock from a corner 21 times. What a weapon that is. It's incredible, isn't it? And I remember the days of like Sam Allardyce, and I remember the days of like Arsenal travelling to Stoke and Blackburn and places like that and coming under aerial bombardment and just not being able to live with it. So watching this now is incredibly satisfying to me as someone who still lives that trauma. My dad grew up watching Arsenal, of course, under George Graham as well. So he looks at it very, very differently. It's like the Graham days. I don't remember the Graham days. So this thing of being like set-piece monsters is new to me. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it. What else have we got here? Kenneth says, Big Gabby has grown and they complement each other. Rizo says, Saliba is clearly the better player, but Gabriel is as important as Saliba. That's a fair comment, I think. Ray Anderson with a bit of a stray question says, not anything to do with today's topic, but question, do you choose only subscribers can make comments? I choose that subscribers of the YouTube channel can make comments, yes. Not Patreons. Like you don't have to be a Patreon or a member on the YouTube channel to be able to make a comment on the channel. No. It's only to stop spammers coming into the chat, because I remember we went through a phase where you'd get like people popping up on the chat saying, watch the free link to X stream, or you'd get, come and check out my naughty webcam, all this nonsense. You'd get these bots coming into the chats and literally spamming it, and then we'd have to stay on top of that, whereas a bot will not subscribe. So it's just a kind of deterrent for that kind of crap, and for the people that we used to get coming on from other channels, not mentioning any names, that were seeking to abuse people and whatever. So it's just a deterrent for that kind of stuff, really. I don't have a problem with someone not being a subscriber, but that's the only way I can do it. I'd prefer that you were a subscriber, though, of course. What else have we got? Wesbird says, on current form, Mr. Wesbird says we are on course to only concede 9 or 10 goals. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? It's mad. It's a great thing. It's something that's really, really important, and long may it continue. Ray Beam says there was this ridiculous perception that set-piece goals were the realm of lower-tier teams. So much for that theory when you can gain 20-plus goals per season. Yeah, for sure. I think when the games are at times so finely balanced, it's about marginal gains. And, you know, if you can gain an advantage from working really hard, harder than everybody else on set pieces, and you can come up with effective routines the way we have, you can come up with different routines and different movements and different plays, if you like. It's almost like an NFL thing, like open up the playbook and, right, we're going to do the near post corner, we're going to do the far post corner, we're going to do the let's get at Vicario corner, for instance. It's really important that you have that, and it won't always work, just like anything else in our sport and in our game. But if it works a lot of the time, if it works half of the time, if it works a quarter of the times, then that can be the difference between picking up points and not. And we've seen over the last couple of years that we've been really, really good in that department. Really, really good in that department. Lots of you asking me for my predicted 11 ahead of Atalanta. I'm not going to do that on today's show because we're going to leave that for tomorrow's comprehensive preview of that Atalanta game. So make sure you tune in for that. Make sure your notifications are turned on. Make sure you're subscribed, all the rest of it. If we could just get a few more likes on the board, I'd be really, really grateful. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. I'll give you a couple of seconds while I talk out of the pod to leave those likes, to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for all your support. As always, remember, check us out on patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner for more content and to be a part of our community. Also, you can, of course, check out NordVPN. I encourage you, in fact, to check out NordVPN, and here's why. because if you don't like the service, if you're not happy with the service, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, which not everybody's going to give you, I think that's a really, really good thing that Nord have put in place. So it gives you the opportunity to get a feel for it. And I think what that does is it brings genuine, loyal customers rather than ones that jump on it for a bit and then maybe decide that actually it's not for them. You will benefit from it and you will use it. Believe me, it is something that I don't want to say it's changed my life, because I think that's been a bit dramatic, but it's opened the door for me to so much more content, to be able to keep across things that I would have missed out on because of my location. I can change my location now with NordVPN. So check them out, nordvpn.com/chroniclesafc, and we thank them for their support of the show over this month as well. I'll see you all on the next one, unless some major news breaks. In fact, I probably wouldn't be able to jump on later today anyway. For those that are interested, I'm commentating tonight on Sky Sports Plus again, which I'm buzzing about, absolutely buzzing about. I've got Colchester United versus the MK Dons in the EFL Trophy. Not the most glamorous of games, but I'm super grateful for the opportunity. Of course, when I was a kid growing up watching Sky Sports, the idea of commentating on a game that was broadcast on there would have blown my mind. And so, yeah, sometimes you have to stop and think about the opportunities that you've got in front of you and be grateful for them. I'll see you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a great Tuesday. All the best. Goodbye.